The conduct at issue exhibits the sort of gross negligence in financial transactions that calls into question your competence and trustworthiness as a financial regulator. Okay, we just have no faith in you. The Supreme Court saying no more of these independent bodies that can just do whatever they want without any oversight. It's ridiculous. It's not how it works. If you wanted that to happen, amend the Constitution.
If this woman committed mortgage fraud, she should be respectful to the United States of America, to the Federal Reserve, where she says she cared about them, and she should go off into the sunset and hope to God the police don't follow her.
A battle at the Federal Reserve getting hot. You see here, President Trump just fired this fraudster, allegedly, Lisa Cook. She was allegedly, according to Bill Pulte, somebody who was signing two separate mortgages in two separate locations, two entirely different houses and condos, and then saying that she lived in both of them as her primary residence. And that gave her a real nice discount on her mortgage rates, because you get different rates if it's a second home or not your primary residence property. So she, of course, is on the Federal Reserve. They set the interest rates. She lied, allegedly, to get lower interest rates. And now Trump is saying, you're fired for cause. And we've got a lot to talk about with this because, of course, the Federal Reserve, we've got a bunch of questions. First of all, can Trump do this within the confines of the Federal Reserve Act, within the Federal Reserve powers, within the law? Like, he's firing her for cause. She's an alleged fraudster. There's been a criminal referral that's already gone over. So can Trump, operating within the law, do this? And we're going to see what we come to. But the other question, of course, is the Federal Reserve at all constitutional? It was created by the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. And it was an act, okay? It's not a constitutional amendment, which is different than the income tax. So Federal Reserve is by statute. And what it seemingly does is create an independent body, just like a bunch of the other agencies have, with the Merit Service Protections Board and so on. We've covered a lot of them. And of course, we've already covered a bunch of lawsuits on this too, where people will say, we're an independent body. You can't fire me. Who do you think you are, the president? Because they say that these independent agencies exist under some new branch of government, some fourth branch that they just made up. No, that's not how it works. There are three branches, unless you want to amend the Constitution to create the Federal Reserve as a separate entity that it is its own structure. Unless you do that, it's got to fit under one of the branches. And where does it fit? The executive branch. Who has power over that? The president. And so the second question, of course, is if Trump doesn't have the power to do this and she wants to fight and she wants to sue and stick around, can we invalidate the entire Federal Reserve? Let's take this thing up to the Supreme Court and see what they say about it. Because right now, we have some good momentum on this unitary executive concept. That's the structure. It's not one executive and a bunch of independent agencies. And so this unitary executive thesis is like new novel, unitary executive. No, it's the executive branch. That's how it's always been. So Trump is firing Lisa Cook and she is not leaving. She says, we're going to battle this out. So the next question, of course, is do they just lock her out? They just cut off her email? Does Jerome Powell follow the president's orders? Or does he have kind of this pseudo fired employee who may not be allowed to be there, still taking official actions at the Federal Reserve? That's a problem. You have an illegitimate employee who is still exercising power? I don't know. So we'll see what Jerome Powell does. Of course, he's going to have to make a decision and they might be duking it out this morning. But here is what Trump said from the White House on August 25th to Lisa Cook. Dear Lisa and Governor Cook, this is coming from your favorite president, Donald Trump. Pursuant to my authority under Article 2 of the Constitution of the United States and the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, as amended, you are hereby removed from your position on the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, effective immediately. Saying the Federal Reserve Act provides that you may be removed in my discretion for cause, okay, within the law. And that's the law. 12 U.S. Code Section 242. I have determined that there is sufficient cause to remove you from your position. Now, as set forth in the criminal referral from Bill Pulte, dated August 15th, that went over to Pam Bondi, AG, there is sufficient reason to believe that you have made false statements on one or more mortgage agreements. For example, as detailed in the criminal referral, you signed one document attesting that a property in Michigan would be your primary residence for the next year. Then 2 weeks later, you signed another document for another property in Georgia, stating that it would be your primary residence for the next year. Trump says it is inconceivable that you were not aware of your first commitment when making the second. It is impossible that you intended to honor both. The Federal Reserve, says Trump, has tremendous responsibility for setting interest rates and regulating reserve and member banks. The American people must be able to have a full confidence in the honesty of the members entrusted with setting this policy and overseeing the Federal Reserve. And so So in light of your deceitful and potentially criminal conduct in a financial matter, they cannot, and I do not have such confidence in your integrity. At minimum, the conduct at issue exhibits the sort of gross negligence in financial transactions that calls into question your competence and trustworthiness as a financial regulator. Okay, we just have no faith in you. And her standard is going to say, well, I'm entitled to the presumption of innocence and I have, due process rights. And until I have a criminal conviction, you can't remove me from this position of power. But I'm sure that's not what the law says at all. It's not, well, you have to be convicted of a class 3 felony, or otherwise you can be a federal. No, don't think so. The president can do it for cause. Well, what is the cause? Being criminally investigated is a pretty big cause. And having the cause of that be a financial matter is another thing. It's like if you're, a cop and like you shoot somebody and there's questions about that. Well, I don't know. Did you do it lawfully or not? I don't know. Put you on leave. You're not going to continue to do the work. You're sidelined for a little while. Or if you're an attorney, you do something bad, you get suspended for a while, or don't touch cases pending the investigation, right? You're kind of on hiatus. You don't get to continue to work there. And so what is Jerome going to do? He says, the executive power of the United States is vested in me as a president. And as president, I have a solemn duty to ensure that the laws of the United States are faithfully executed. I have determined that faithfully executing the law requires your immediate removal from office. Thank you for your attention to this matter, period. Donald J. Trump, America's favorite president. And now we got a reaction. So Lisa Cook, this is interesting, saying, I'm not going anywhere, from Kyle Cheney. And look who Lisa Cook hired. Look at this name right here. Abby Lowell. That's Hunty's lawyer. Oh, Hunty Poo. It's also Tishy's lawyer too. So just representing the creme de la creme. So she went and hired that dude. And I would love to know what he's charging for a retainer right now. It's hilarious. Lisa Cook says she's not going anywhere and Trump can't fire me. She writes, President Trump purported to fire me for cause when no cause exists under the law, and he has no authority to do so. I will not resign. I will continue to carry out my duties to help the American economy as I have been doing since 2022 when Joe Biden shoved her in there as the first historic African-American federal governor. And historically, she's the first one, I think, accused of ever committing mortgage fraud. So that's pretty interesting too. So she's not going to resign. We'll take a look at the law here in a second. But Abby Lowell says, President Trump has taken to social media to once again fire by tweet. That's not what happened. He sent the letter. We just read it. And once again, his reflex to bully is flawed and his demands lack any proper process, basis, or legal authority. We will take whatever actions are needed to prevent his attempted illegal action. And so they're going to fight back on that. Trump, of course, is referencing 12 U.S. Code Section 242. So here's some of the qualifications, and it's a pretty short statute. It says, the members of the board shall be ineligible during the time they are in office and for 2 years thereafter, unless sooner removed for cause by the president. All right, no wonder. That's like the only thing. So you shall be there in a manner such as to provide not more one member in any 2-year period, and thereafter each member shall hold for a term of 14 years unless sooner removed for cause. And that's the statute. So cause, I'm sure, is going to be a very, very broadly defined term. In other words, I don't think it's going to say you can only remove for cause if you're convicted of a felony after a jury trial, which is going to basically be her standard. I'm innocent. I deserve the presumption of innocence, blah, blah, blah. So Bloomberg is saying this is causing a ruckus, and apparently some of the markets are shifting. They're like, oh gosh, is Trump going to take over the Federal Reserve? Because now we have another problem. What happens if Jerome Powell supports this person and this person, Lisa Cook, can be removed, right? So let's say she sues. There's going to be a legal battle here. Trump's going to say, don't let her in the building. She's going to sue to get access to the building. She'll sue, and probably some judge will do it. We've gone through this before. We already did this with the guy fired from the special counsel's office, who was Hunter Biden's best friend, and many others. They all sue. You can't fire me. And they've all lost so far. Like there's nobody in here who has won this so far. So the pattern is in our favor. It's trending towards the Supreme Court saying no more of these independent bodies that can just do whatever they want without any oversight. It's ridiculous. It's not how it works. If you wanted that to happen, amend the Constitution, but it was a Federal Reserve Act. It's a congressional act, so it doesn't override this framework that is articulated in the Constitution. So Trump said sufficient cause. Let's see what they say about this. Wasn't immediate clear whether she intended to challenge this. The Fed has officially declined to comment. She, of course, has responded. Others are saying this is a kill shot at the Fed independence. Because here's the thing. If she was ultimately, allowed to be removed, let's say we fast forward 3 months, the Supreme Court comes back down and says, Trump can fire her. And Jerome was enabling her for 3 months, then he was operating against the president, and that violates, I would say, argue his integrity, and that should be firing for cause for Jerome, for aiding and abetting somebody who was fired fired by the president of the United States. So right now it put pressure on him. So what is he going to do? If he defends her, then he might be complicit. If he doesn't, then Trump's appointing this new person, and it looks like the Fed is acquiescing. So he's stuck. I mean, this is smart playing from Trump here. Trump had earlier called for Cook's resignation, and she didn't resign. He gave her a chance, and they're freaking. Okay, the left is going nuts on this. So we got Elizabeth Warren and a bunch of other people were chiming in, very upset. And obviously we know why, because they want the Federal Reserve to be operating according to their policy prescriptions. Mark Warner says the Fed was designed to operate to be insulated from political pressure. It's not political pressure. She's an alleged fraudster, and she has no basis of being somebody who manages mortgage rates and interest rates when she's lying on her own. Nadler's also talking about it. He says this is unlawful and we're going to fight it. And it's interesting to see. It's like, look at all of them, right? Okay, we talk about this, how the Democratic Party, often you can tell who or what issue is in alignment with them just based on their reaction. And so, like, for example, if Lisa Cook is really independent and absent any, partisan influence or any of those things, why are all the Democrats popping out of the Jack in the Box, spring loaded, boo, boo, feckless, illegal, sycophants, okay, constantly? Like, just little, it's because Lisa Cook is theirs and they're protecting her. They don't want her to get off that board. And they know that the Fed is currently a big impediment to the American public and the president. So they're working hard. Now, here was a great comment from Jim Bianco, who articulated this. He says, Cook is refusing to leave is difficult. If they allow her to continue her duties starting this morning and the court finds that she's in trouble later, anything she does will be invalid and the Fed will be held responsible. Jerome says if the Fed allows her to stay, then he committed a for-cause offense and he could be fired too. And then a non-federal employee could make decisions and policy on behalf of the Federal Reserve, right? So like this thing could spiral depending on what Jerome does. And this dude is a macro investment researcher. And so he's following this stuff pretty closely. A lot of people go, what is this going to do? What is this going to mean when this all comes down?
This question about who needs to turn off her badge or turn off her paycheck is, if the answer is that ultimately Chair Powell is the one responsible for that and he chooses not to, then the secondary question becomes, does the president try to fire him for cause?
Well, these are all what-if scenarios. The answer is the Department of Justice will go take this on and deal with this. But the fact is, if this woman committed mortgage fraud, she should be respectful to the United States of America, to the Federal Reserve, where she says she cared about them, and she should go off into the sunset and hope to God the police don't follow her.
Well, I don't know about that. I think that no one's above the law. They gave us that standard. And so Lisa Cook and Jerome are going to be stuck in a tough position. And they're going to say that he has no cause under the law. I think a criminal referral is pretty good cause. And we're going to see where it goes. So we'll keep our eye on the building. We'll see if she's prohibited from coming in. And we can fully expect a lawsuit from her and Abby Lowell very soon.